Mhm.
Sharon Wright Austin is a professor at the University of Florida, where she teaches African American Studies and Political Science. Her first book, Race, Power, and Political Emergence in Memphis, was published by Garland Publishing in 2000 under her maiden name, Sharon Wright. A second book, The Transformation of Plantation Politics, Black Politics, Concentrated Poverty, and Social Capital in the Mississippi Delta, was published by the State University of New York, SUNY, at Albany Press in 2006. A third book, The Caribbeanization of Black Politics, Race Group Consciousness, and Political Participation in America, was also published in SUNY in 2018. In 2023, she co-edited Beyond Racial Capitalism, Cooperatives in the African Diaspora, Oxford University Press, with Caroline Shenaz Hossein and Kelvin Edmonds, and edited Political Black Girl Magic, The Elections and Governance of Black Female Mayors, Temple University Press. And on today's episode of our interview, it's my utmost pleasure and joy to have again Sharon Wright on the show. Welcome on the show, Sharon.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be on your show again.
Yeah, it's my utmost pleasure again. I'm excited.
So am I.
Yeah. So, Sharon, could you tell us about your book, Beyond Racial Capitalism? How did this book come about? I mean, what inspired you to write Beyond Racial Capitalism?
I have a copy of the book right here,
Yeah.
Beyond Racial Capitalism, Cooperatives in the African Diaspora. And I co-edited this book with two of my good friends, Dr. Caroline Hussein and Dr. Kevin Edmonds. Both of them are professors at the
Oh.
University of Toronto. And Dr. Hussein has been doing research. She has a very popular book entitled Politicized Microfinance. And she's done a lot of work looking at different cooperatives in the African diaspora. And so she was working on this book and she asked me to join her in working on it because I was also doing
Mm.
some research in Washington, D.C. and New York City on the same topic. And Professor Edmonds also joined us because he was doing similar research in the Caribbean. And so over the years, she's done this research and I had read her work and I was
Mm.
just fascinated by it. So it made me want to study the same topic. But that's how I was motivated to work on this book was because she was already working on it. It was a topic that I was knowledgeable about, very concerned about. And we just decided that we were going to put together an edited book and invite some people to do chapters on cooperatives in different countries.
Wow, that's quite amazing. That's really amazing. I love the sound of it. And now, Sharon, from reading the Oxford University Press content of the book's page, it was mentioned that the book seeks to offer examples of the Black radical tradition among indigenous people, racialized and indigenous migrant, and also descendants of enslaved persons in the diaspora and to also build a decolonized library of Black and feminist scholars in the field of political science and economics. I'm curious to ask you, why exactly is this a cogent theme to tackle?
A cogent theme because of the Black radical tradition, which basically says that over the years in every country on every continent, Black
Mm,
people have been oppressed, have had to deal with
absolutely.
different types of discrimination, and have
Yeah.
had to come together and use radical ways to try to benefit economically and also benefit politically. In many of the
Mm,
countries that we look at in the book, women especially, and men as well, have not had political power, have faced political discrimination, economic discrimination. And so,
mm,
as a result of that, they come together and they pool their resources together. And so that's why it's a thing. It's a very comprehensive book that looks at communities in Canada, the United States, the Caribbean, on the African continent, in Brazil, Ireland, and other countries in Europe. And it just talks about how women of color, namely Black women, come together and they pool their money together in these alternative economies as a way to rebel against the discrimination that they face and as a way to benefit themselves and their
oh,
communities. And so
Wow.
that's why it's a theme. It talks about just the power of women to fight back. That even
Mm,
when you're faced with all kinds of economic discrimination, even if you're living in poverty, or even if you're not living in poverty, whatever you're up against, whatever you're fighting against, women always find a way to work together to benefit
yeah.
themselves and benefit their family. So that's the main theme. If there's anything to take from the book, that's the
Wow.
main theme of it.
Well, I love the sound of it. I particularly love the sound of your books. It sounds like a great resource for the preservation of the history of a particular race, of a particular people. And that's very amazing. And now I love also to ask you my third question. I think your career as a professor of African American Studies and Political Science influenced your writing. As most of your titles are centered on historical, political, and educative content, tell us, how does your career as a professor influence you to becoming an author? And also, are there any similarities between what you teach in class and what you write in books? I'm curious.
I've been a professor now since 1992. It seems like just
Wow.
yesterday, but I was still in graduate school when I took my first position in Pan African Studies at
Wow.
the University of Louisville. And since then, I've been teaching at the University of Missouri, Columbia, University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and for the last 22 years at the University of Florida. So,
Wow.
as professors, we pretty much have to publish, especially at the types of schools where I've taught. They've been research one schools, and they heavily require that we publish either articles or books or a combination of both. So, luckily for me, I've always been able to find interesting topics that, as far as writing a book, it's a lot of work, it's very time consuming. But for me, it doesn't even really seem like work because I love to read and I love to write.
Mm,
So my career as a professor, with the reading and the writing that I've done, the requirements that you have to publish or perish, that has motivated me to be an author because really I had no
wow.
choice in the matter. But even if I hadn't had to publish, I would have done it anyway because I just love to write and to have and to do things like this, publicize books and see the finished product after having worked on a book for years, finally
Mm,
having it published and then seeing the way the public embraces it. I really enjoy that. So,
yeah.
and then the second part of your question was, are there any similarities between what I teach in class
Yeah.
and what I write in books? There are a lot of similarities because I teach political science and African American studies. My main specialization is in African American politics, and I also look at Black women's politics. So the books that I write always deal with those topics in some aspect of Black politics. And
Oh.
now I'm branching out and making my classes more internationalized because now I'm going to be working with a professor in South Africa on a class that I'm teaching next year. And I'm trying to include more, even about when looking at the Black experience in America,
Mm,
comparing that to the Black experience in Britain, because there are a lot of similarities.
yeah.
So now I'm looking at maybe teaching courses that look compare African American issues to issues of Blacks in other countries, and hopefully I'll be able to maybe write a book about that at some point in the future.
Wow. I so much love the sound of that. I love the sound of it. That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. Now, Sharon, could you tell us what publishing is like for a published author like yourself? Are there any challenges you've encountered ever since you got published?
Let's see. I think for me, I always go with academic presses because this
Mm,
book was published by Oxford University Press, which
uh,
is considered to be probably is for a political science researcher for research generally the number one press, I guess, in the world. So we were very fortunate to have them agree to publish this book at
uh,
Oxford University Press. So as far as my experience in working with them, it's been very good because they basically tell you exactly how to edit the book. You write the book and they read it and they tell you what to do. They send it to reviewers. The reviewers give
uh,
you feedback. So, and then they also help with marketing the book all over the world, even putting it in different languages. So it's just been a really good experience in working with them. And then, as far as the second question, the challenges that I've encountered, I haven't had any challenges with this book. But I think the main challenge is because this book looks at women in different countries. I really would like to visit those countries to promote the book. And I think
Mm,
the biggest challenge is making sure that people know that you've written this book, and know what it's about. And for example, one of the chapters deals with Brazil. I wish I could go there to talk about the book or find some
mm,
places there so that I could publicize it. Just making sure that you publicize your book all over the world and not just in your country. That's
yeah.
probably the biggest challenge.
Oh, that's amazing. I love the sound. It's quite nice to know into have a look of what challenges you've encountered and how it's been so far ever since it got published. Now, I also love to ask you, how does it feel to work with other contributors on a book? I see there are a lot of professors who contributed to the work in Beyond Racial Capitalism. How does it feel to work with this group of contributors on a project? Would you love to talk about that?
It's been wonderful working with the group. I mostly have written books in the past just by
Oh.
myself. So it's much nicer to be able to, first of all, divide responsibilities so that you're
Mm,
not responsible for every chapter. The group of authors have been very open to feedback. We've gotten feedback from anonymous reviewers and from the
wow.
publisher, and they have told them how to edit it, the chapters that they've written, or things to include or not include, and they've been very welcoming of that. It's just been a wonderful experience. Like for example, I can just tell you a little bit about some of the chapters.
Yeah.
One is by Dr. Hossein on Black Canadian cooperatives. She's written a few of the chapters. One chapter looks at Nigerian immigrants in North America.
Oh,
The chapter that I wrote looks at Black women in Washington, D.C. and New York City.
wow.
Another good friend of mine, Dr. Patricia Campos Medina of Cornell University, wrote something about indigenous Mexican immigrants in New Jersey and Staten Island, New York.
Mm,
Another, Dr. Kevin Edmonds, who is one of the editors, wrote about the building of a Black social economy in the Eastern Caribbean.
wow.
And then also another person wrote about Brazil. One person wrote about Nigerian women in Dublin, Ireland. And Dr. Hussein finally wrote about Caribbean banker ladies making equitable economies is the title of the chapter on women in Jamaica, Haiti, Guyana, Trinidad, and Grenada. So, I mean,
Mm,
we had a very diverse group of people who have diverse research interests, and all of us came together. And I think the best thing about it is that it shows that women can work together well. And that's
absolutely.
what the theme of the book is: women working together to build these economies, but as us, as scholars, that women can work together well.
Yeah. Wow. I love the sound of it. And particularly, I love the fact that you showed the titles as those other professors worked on. Really made for an interesting discussion. Great one. Thank you so much, Sharon, for sharing.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Now, is there anything that you would love to share with the viewers about beyond racial capitalization that we did not
Mhm.
mention in this interview and you'd love the viewers to know?
Yeah, I just wanted the viewers to know a little bit more about racial capitalism and what the title of it means when we talk about beyond
Mm,
racial capitalism. I'm looking at the back cover of the book, and we explain what that means. It's a concept that political scientist Cedric Robinson came up with, and it talks about just the fact that in capitalist systems, they have always, in some ways, exploited Black people, and
mm,
racial capitalism is a way in which Black people fight back
back.
against that economic exclusion. And so that's what this book is mostly about, just the fact that people are fighting back in countries all over the world because they've been excluded in terms of businesses.
Mm,
They've been excluded because of systemic racism, and then they've been fighting for economic empowerment and political empowerment as well.
mm,
So I think that this is a book it's an academic book, but it also
yeah.
is a book, even if you're not a student or a teacher, it's a book I think you would just enjoy reading about these women and their lives and what they've achieved.
Yeah, I love the sound of it. And I knew actually, when I saw the book on the website, that this is an amazing academic book that you can also learn from, to know more about this topic and team. So that's really an amazing thing to write about. That's really impressive. I love it. Now, for interested viewers who would love to get a copy of Beyond Racial Capitalization, on what platform is it available on for purchase?
Beyond Racial Capitalism is available at the publisher, which is Oxford University Press, but it also is available on Amazon. And if you just type the title of it, Beyond Racial Capitalism, Cooperatives in the African Diaspora,
Yeah.
into a search engine, you can find it at places, bookstores, online, and also in bookstores just all over the world, Barnes and Noble, Walmart, places all over the world. But probably the easiest way to get it would be from the publisher, from Oxford, or to get it
Oh,
from Amazon.
oh, great. And I left a link in the discussion part of this interview to the book's page on Amazon and also on Oxford University Press for readers who would love to get a copy to check it out directly. So thank you so much, Sharon, for accepting the invitation again to be featured on P English Literature. It's awesome we're having this conversation again.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure being on the show, and thank you for inviting me to talk about my work.
Yeah, it's my pleasure as well.